This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Methodify by Delvinia. Get real-world customer feedback in hours, not weeks. Schedule your demo and get a free $20 Starbucks gift card. Go to methodify.it/BeanCast and methodify it today. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 585. It took a global pandemic. For Monday, March 23rd, 2020. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. As we settle into another week of global lockdown, brands seem to be searching for any means of staying relevant to consumers during these troubling times. And as you would expect, many are struggling with the assignment. So tonight we'll look for clarity. Also making work from home work, the current dilemma for freelancers, Facebook's new desktop look, plus this week's fair, fail, foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Admiral of the HMS Beagle and author of many books, including his latest, Built to Suck, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. I almost sucked on your intro, Joe.
You almost did, but I have to say one thing very quickly. Normally, and now most people don't know this, you always ask, are there any topics that might get you fired? And I think now we're living through the most interesting times where I don't think you actually need to ask that question anymore.
I know. All the subjects seem to be interesting and relevant on the same topic, but we'll get to that in just a minute. Next, we have the author of both 6 Pixels of Separation and Control-Alt-Delete, as well as a prolific podcaster and blogger, the founder of the 6 Pixels group, Mr. Mitch Joel. Hi, Mitch.
Bobby, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Now, also with us, calling in from the middle of the night from Paris, France, co-founder of esports agency Hurrah, a freelance journalist who's been published in all kinds of places and is now a frequent contributor to Muse by Clio, Ms. Angela Natividad. Angela, I always love having you on the program.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. I'm happy to be back.
And finally, he's Executive Vice President of Advanced Media for Viacom CBS and one of the smartest media minds in the business. Mr. Julian Zilberbrand is here. Hi, Julian.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me back. I had other plans tonight, but as it turned out, I really had no place else to go.
It's, it's not funny, but it's funny, but it's not funny. I mean, it's just,
you got to laugh to stop from crying.
It makes it very easy to book my show right now, let me tell you. Well, it's becoming quickly obvious how how brands choose to respond to this crisis is going to have a lasting impact on how they will be perceived for years, if not decades after. Joe, this week you joined in on this with an article that you wrote for your newsletter. It's a topic that many folks out there are trying to basically impress on brands, the fact that this is not going to be quickly shed, that your actions now matter. What are the opportunities and the obvious pitfalls that you talked about? And let's just open up the floor for some discussion on this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, first of all, these are unprecedented times, and I think it's safe to say that most companies are not going to try and get in that real-time tweet and be able to take advantage and be opportunistic from a messaging standpoint. That said, companies are clearly between a rock and a hard place in terms of figuring out their point of view and their position. And I think for the most part, companies are doing a fairly good job at being able to address this with respect to their customers. For example, Microsoft Teams has offered their product to businesses free for 6 months. Now, obviously, you could look at that cynically, but who cares, as I wrote about, because this is a clear example of adding value. Yes, after 6 months of using this product for free and building up equity and becoming a better user, chances are that companies are going to then want to subscribe. And then the other example that I cited in my newsletter was, from the sublime to the ridiculous, Pornhub offered free access to Italians during the quarantine period. And this was early on. And of course, it's a little bit more lighthearted. But then there are several other examples like early on, like LVMH, transforming or turning their actual production of their factories to producing hand sanitizer. Now, I'll put that aside for a second and just, address this, I think this key issue, which is with companies looking to add value, or with companies looking to try and figure out what is our point of view or messaging. For example, I think this is a good thing, right? What Ford has done is, rather than pool their advertising, and this does go back to another question, which is what should the media companies be doing? But Ford has changed their messaging to address the situation, to address, their customers' fears, to talk about what happens if a customer struggles with respect to paying their lease. But I was going to say, if you put all of that aside, I think there's something else that I would lob over to my esteemed panelists as well, which is you've got these companies sending out these emails, talking about what's going to happen to your elite status if you're Marriott, your Bonvoy status, which is awesome. But at the same time, you've got these companies also laying off thousands and tens of thousands of employees. And so, it really is a challenge right now, which is, is this truly an authentic commitment to and a customer, as I would call it, a customer obsessed effort? But guess what? You can't be. I mean, and I'll just say one more thing, and then turn over to you. I saw the CEO of Kraft Heinz being interviewed, and the question to them. I mean, clearly they're in a somewhat of an enviable position, because people need to eat and need to be able to access their food. And the question was, so are you hiring people? And the answer was, no, we're not hiring anyone. We're not letting them go, but we're not hiring them. Why? Because we actually also supply all the restaurants, so many food service restaurants that have had to close down as well. So where and while we're keeping the supermarkets going, we've lost business. And of course, anyone who knows Kraft Heinz and the whole 3G, private equity infusion, and their love for cost cutting, it just kind of rubbed me up the wrong way to be able to kind of still see a company focused on their bottom line. So I didn't want to go into too much of a rant, but I think it's one of those things where companies have got to do something. For the most part, you can only applaud them. I would say don't be cynical about what they're doing, but at the same time, they've got to be able to back up those actions with, I think, a holistic, 360-degree commitment to community, to employees. Otherwise, it falls flat, in my opinion.
I'll take a bit of a different perspective. The world is on fire, and I sort of jokingly, if I drank, would take a shot every time I heard the word unprecedented, because it's just the word we keep using. But I think what's actually happened is, because it's on fire and all of us are struggling, trying to figure out where the work is, what we are going to do, how we are going to get our kids through this, when might this calm down, what is happening, how will I get the bare essentials while leaving my home as infrequently as possible, that brands can pretty much do whatever they want because we are focused on ourselves. And I do believe that there's been a certain diffusion of the general business population from my own perspective, and I'm just being a market of one here, but I believe it, that even while brands can do what is good, they can also, as Joe very saliently pointed out, do what is bad, which is cut half their staff, or chop off or lob off certain components of the business, or drop their agency completely cold in the middle of a project. And even if we are paying slight attention, we are not paying enough attention because we're worried about ourselves. And if you forecast this into a 2, 3, 4 year impact, I do not think we will have many situations come out where it is clear that someone is doing a good job or a bad job, and we will either elevate them or punish them because of this moment, only because we are all rightfully being very, very self-centered. And I'll give you an iteration of this because I had a conversation very recently with another person who's been on the show frequently, Tom Webster from Medicine Research, and he was sort of jogging around Boston and in the Commons area in Newbury Street, which people know as being very commercial, which is a combination of major retailers and local retailers. And he was saying how sad it was to see so many of these local retailers struggling, shuttered, not open. And that, there's the Amazon effect as well, compounded with this sort of world on fire moment. And I took a bit of a different position, and I think it's worthy of a conversation. I collect comic books. I have my local comic book shop here. And as this started escalating, it became this whole calling people, letting them know, hey, this issue's coming out, or this special edition, do you want it? Hey, I don't mind holding things for you. I don't mind dropping them off at your house on my way home. If you're worried about coming into the store, you can call me and I'll slip them through the door. All of these amazing community-based helpful things. But to me, my reaction was, why weren't you doing this 6 years ago? Why, had you really been community focused and customer centric and local and not charging me 40% more than Amazon, I wouldn't see this as you're desperate and panicked because you might go bankrupt, but I might see it as, wow, this is a person who is stand up, part of the community, doing their best to build the business within the community in light of Amazon. And Tom and I went back and forth on this, but I really do feel that it's like, I wish more businesses that are acting the way they're acting today had been acting this way 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah, this is an ongoing issue for brands even before COVID-19, even before the coronavirus. And I think you're absolutely right about this. The consistency is an important factor of any strong brand. And if you don't have consistency and you don't have that basis for having this opinion now, it's not believable anymore. And I think that that's the lesson that a lot of brands are going to be learning the hard way over the next few months, is trying to realize that you can't just turn around and become caring of your consumer now that they're gone and you need them back to survive. I mean, the airline industry comes to mind brutally in my mind. It's just like, you can't treat the customer so badly and expect them to bail you out in the end. It's not going to.
And the output of that's going to be very real, because here I live in Canada, and they've gotten rid of 50% of all their flight attendants, and they've gotten rid of 100% within that 50% of their Rouge, which is their sort of lower fare airline or their low cost carrier. And I sort of look at that and go, as a super elite 100K multi-million flyer, that, man, this service is really going to suck when it kicks back in. Well, that's the problem too, because they're going to be trying to save. They're going to be trying to optimize. Like, trust me, when this turns around, and it will, this is not going to be good customer experience for anybody. It's going to be a nightmare.
Well, I mean, there's another point, just while we're talking about the airlines, of course, which is that, this whole conversation about the airlines have enjoyed several really great years. But of course, what it turns out and what it transpires is that, most of the success, certainly in the stock price of these airlines, has come from buybacks and, from stock buybacks. And so, you've got these airlines that certainly, when times were good, I mean, Mitch is talking about how bad it's going to be, how bad it's going to be at the end of this. It's been pretty bad in terms of customer service and customer centricity leading up until this moment. And they've enjoyed, when times were good, they didn't give a damn. And now that times are bad, they're going to reach out to us and ask. And we've seen, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've had to cancel several flights. I'm not getting the money back in my pocket. I'm not getting the money back refunded in my credit card. These are now credits waiting to be used for future flights. That is such BS.
And those flights are going to be very, very expensive. They're going to be understaffed, and the quality of the product's going to drop even more because of their need to optimize as soon as the lights get turned back on.
I mean, is it too much to expect or to anticipate some level of altruism in every possible company? Because I would almost argue it kind of is. Companies are made up of humans. Humans are flawed.
Sure.
They're going to act and behave in certain ways when times are good, and behave in other ways when times are bad. And I don't know that, at least I personally have levels of expectations that I put on brands that I would have some level of expectation in terms of, certain approaches. And I think you would be hard pressed, and I'm hard pressed to put that much emphasis on the expectation that I think everybody's going to behave in a certain manner when the times, dictate it. And I think that would be expected.
I agree. I don't think it's fair to apply a should to anybody, least of all brands. But I think that we forget is America is the last industrialized country that does not have a functioning social welfare system. We really do leave it up to the market to solve problems. We really do ideologically behave like brands should be doing something for the community. That's something that we fundamentally believe. Whether or not that's true in the facts is really different. So yeah, we have certain expectations, and in some ways we're right to have those expectations because, for example, it is your company's decision whether or not you have properly functioning healthcare. On the other hand, yeah, companies are composed of people. Companies, especially in the US, are under a great deal of pressure. And I would say they can be a little bit more altruistic when there are certain incentives that help them to do that. So, for example, in France, like we obviously have no idea what's going to happen. All signs are pointing to us, sticking it out for quite a long haul. The government, for example, has pushed back the tax limit. Certain taxes, certain social charges are no longer obliged for this period or have been pushed back. And also companies have been given lots of different options to actually protect the people who are working with them. So for example, you can put people on 80% unemployment, which means that people can still work for you, but you only have half of the burden of paying for them, and the other half is taken on by the government, and they can get still up to 87% of their pay. Obviously, it's not ideal, but it keeps the lights on for more people for a longer amount of time. So I think that we have to think of things from that perspective too. We just have really different expectations of the market in the US. And also, we don't really have incentives in place for people to actually get brands to behave better.
That's the key. If altruism paid, companies would do it. We haven't incentivized them to behave in that manner, and we haven't justified the reasons why they should, and that where they can benefit as much as the consumer. And so this is as much about how we've set corporate expectations and what kind of behavior we've allowed companies, especially public companies, to operate in versus what we might anticipate they behave like in a time of need.
Well, yeah. Look, ultimately, people are good. Constraints, policies, accounting, legal, all coming together at that spot is what creates the problem. And I think that sure. is the thing. Is you're absolutely right. Both Julian and Angela, I agree 100%. I'm a big brand proponent. Obviously, I love brands. But it's not about the brand and it's not about the people working there. It's about what the company will institutionalize in order to figure out a way to make the road from Corona COVID-19 all the way back to profitability to look a certain way for whoever the stakeholder is, whether it's a public market, whether it's private, whether it's whatever, because that is unfortunately this still the core functionality of both capitalism and how business operates. So I think that the people on the ground want to do the best. The people operating well. I've always said this for my 20 years of running an agency. Yeah. Good people, smart people, and yet still people will say things like the only thing worse than selling to company XYZ is not selling to company XYZ. So there's problems, and these problems are going to metastasize over this terrible period. And really, at the end of it, mark my words on this, everyone listening, the customer is going to really suffer when the lights come back on here.
Oh, they're suffering already. I don't think that we operate in a market system that demonstrates you are of value just because you're alive.
I agree.
I mean, listen, I want to think about that, and I want to respond to that maybe another time because it's an interesting point of view, and it's one I haven't thought of, hadn't thought about before, I should say. I want to go back to, first of all, I'm always reminded by what Bob Garfield would say about the agency business. He'd say the agency business, a bunch of smart people making dumb decisions. So I think it is, what I've kind of used it now when I talk, when I give a presentation, I'll basically say, We're all smart people. We're all educated. We're all good people. But somehow when we walk into our corporate jobs, we get overcome with dumb. So that's how I've started to talk about it. But I want to go back to what Julian said. He spoke about, he said, altruism pays, or when altruism pays. Yes, it does. Philanthropy as a business model. I mean, we're seeing, I call it, certainly I call it the growth pillar of corporate citizenship. But we've seen, and we all know these examples, from Tom Shoes to Patagonia. We're seeing more and more companies, a lot of the DTC companies, building their entire platform on altruism. But I want to go back to, when the dust settles and when everybody comes out of their holes and their caves and their homes again, we know that this entire this consumerism, this new consumerism, is moving towards supporting companies that share our beliefs and our ideals and the same kinds of values that we identify with. And to me, the question is it real? Is it authentic? Will these companies follow through? How bad will it be, or good will it be for the customers? So I jotted down basically 4 things that I think I was jotting it down right now, that of course I don't think any company will do this, but these are the 4 things that I think if a company comes out and does one or more of these, that they will absolutely benefit, maybe not short term or even medium term, but long term. Number 1, executives take zero bonus. And look, I'm not going to say what the time frame is. Is it 2020? Is it a calendar year? Is it a financial year? And in some cases, executives take home zero pay for a certain period of time because they've got enough money in the bank and they've got enough of a nest egg. Number 2, companies commit to zero profit. They cover their costs, they get through a certain amount of time, and that's it. Number 3, customers have zero obligation to have to pay or pay interest on the money that they owe, and some kind of amnesty or some kind of period not to have to pay, against whatever their lease is or whatever the case may be. Number 4, that these companies donate a percentage. This is biblical, 10%, right? A percentage of their profits to food banks and to charity and to helping community, not just their customers. And in some cases, maybe 4A or 5 is they turn and transform their own production facilities to create, to produce masks or ventilators, or whatever the case may be. Now that is a flippin' tall order, I get, but that, to me, that's the bar. Can anybody meet
Joe,
that bar?
two things, Joe. One is, when are you moving to Canada? And 2 is, when are all these companies moving to Canada?
Well,
that doesn't sound.
They close the border.
That
If I can stay with you, I'm coming.
That does not sound at all like the capitalism that the U.S. of A. knows, likes, and loves. Unfortunately.
But it is the evolution of capitalism, and certainly many of the things that we're talking about now, with the Production Act, with handouts, not handouts, with this direct payment to customers, with free tests.
Joe, I love you, man. But job 1 is getting
socialism. That sounds like socialism to me.
Job 1 is getting the stock market back to where it was, period, and that's going to create a lot of push down pain.
Well, here's the thing. That nice, Shangri-La that you described, Joe, is only realistic for select companies, and would have to be, modeled against, or managed against, I should say, how investors might treat their stock. To Mitch's point, right? If that happens and you don't show profits, do I pull all my money out? And so on and so forth. So there's this, cyclical relationship between the marketplace and the people invested, at least, and the companies themselves. So I don't know that we can put that much expectation on individual companies. I think it has to start at government level, because the government has the availability to print money, okay? And if you don't start at the environment where you could print money, because the stimulus that's coming, 1 trillion, 2 trillion, or whatever it is, right? That's not money being pulled away from other investments per se. That's money being printed. And so it has to start over there, and you have to manage that dollar value and manage creating that money and passing it out, and make sure when you pass out the money that you're actually holding companies accountable for how you give them money. If you're bailing out the airline industry, no buybacks for X period of time till the money's paid back, cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of varying ways to do it, but it has to start with government. The government has to set a leadership position that a company would be basically suicidal not to follow. If the government is pushing that position, the companies within that municipality, if you will push that position as well. If the pressure is coming from on top and from the bottom from consumers, then companies, I believe, would be, I hate to say forced, but they'd be obligated to do the right thing. And all those things that you lay out would be doable, right? And everybody would be able to manage against it as long as the government was providing some support for all these companies to manage that. Until we get it from the top, it doesn't work anywhere else.
And both of the and look, whether it's Republican or Democrats, if you look at leadership on both fronts at this point, ain't happening. They all know
it's failed.
They got to push this economy forward, and that's going to be job one.
I'm still hoping for the Star Trek reality where everybody realizes we have to survive. Let's pause the economy and discover that, hey, we can all work together towards solving a problem, and that there's other things to worry about other than money. But that's a whole socialist rant that I won't get onto. Well, we're going to talk next about the work from home reality and how the little acronym WFH seems to be the most used one that I'm seeing online these days. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor for this evening, Methodify by Delvinia, and give you just another opportunity. Let me see. Julian, could you hit your mute button? That'd be great. Methodify by Delvinia, and give you another opportunity to get a $20 Starbucks gift card just for checking them out. But first, let's talk about advertising. Have you ever looked at an ad? And you know I've been asking this question for a couple of weeks. Have you ever looked at an ad and said to yourself, how did you get approved? How did they ever get this thing approved? Or maybe someone is going to get fired over this. I've said it many times when I've seen something that I thought was a little bit risque or a little bit off color or a little bit stupid. It happens more often than it should, but the important thing is that it doesn't have to happen to you because you can use Methodify by Delvinia. Now, Methodify empowers you to collect real feedback from your actual customers within hours. Yes, I said that right. Within hours, to give you your insight teams and your senior marketing people the information they need to power better decisions. Now, we all know asking the wrong questions to your target market, or worse yet, asking the right questions to the wrong people, is the same as not gathering information at all. Methodify helps solve these problems and quickly give you more actionable insights to help you avoid costly marketing mistakes. Now, recent decisions that Methodify has powered include helping select which comedian should be featured in a national television spot for a major bank, testing digital creative before it was launched for a top 5 food chain, new pricing models for a software company you probably interact with on a daily basis in your business. The use cases here are endless and valuable because the insights are coming from actual customer feedback within hours, not weeks. Now, as we all know, we're all sitting around inside our houses. You've got a captive audience of people to get to, people more willing to work with your surveys. You've got time on your hands to play around with a new tool. I want you to go and find out more about Methodify and set up a demo right now. Just go to methodify.it/BeanCast. That's let's try this again. methodify.it/BeanCast. Yes, we're telling you to Methodify it. And as a way of saying thanks, every BeanCast listener who signs up and completes a demo will receive a $20 Starbucks gift card just for your time. I know most Starbucks are closed at this moment, but you will have a chance to use it again. I promise you. And heaven knows we all have plenty of time at this moment. So go ahead, use that address, go to methodify.it/BeanCast, sign up for the demo, get your $20 Starbucks gift card, and we thank them very much for the support of our show. Well, if there's one technology company that everyone wishes they had been an early investor in at this critical moment in our history, it's probably Zoom. Now, the virtual meeting platform is forming the backbone of most agency and brand work-from-home strategies, as well as the remote learning tool of choice for trainers and universities everywhere. Mitch, is this just a momentary change in the way we work, or or will this forever change the operational reality of the needs for massive office footprints? I mean, and going beyond Zoom in particular and talking about the work from home phenomenon, this is really stress testing the idea of work from home as a model at scale. Will it have a lasting impact? Will it change the way we do work?
Well, a couple things. One is you don't have to be an early investor in Zoom. If you had invested in them in December, you would have seen about a 70+% uptick in your stock. So it may even still be a good buy for all I know. I'm not an investment advisor, so don't take any financial advice from me. Look, I think ultimately what we're seeing is the reality. And the reality, I think I can personally speak to. I'm a professional speaker. I do 40 to 60 speaking events a year. And I tell people that my life currently was like sitting in the airport looking at the departures and watching every flight get canceled is basically what my schedule has become. And when I think about who is switching to have virtual events, I would say very few people. There are a handful, but not as many as you would think. And there's a reason for that. Nothing replaces that moment when we are all together under a shared roof in our protein forms. Work virtually is simply different. I had multiple offices when I ran an agency, and even videos and connecting to other offices and clients was always what I would say as different. So I don't think that this is going to be any form of stress test for the work from home revolution. I think if anything, it's going to substantiate how important it is for us to be together and for us to be in that sort of environment together as a team working for the common goal. Technology has been providing all these sort of telecommuting platforms for forever and ever. And I think we are just forced into doing it now, but it's not necessarily the preferred way of doing it. I was thinking about reflecting earlier to what Joe said about Microsoft offering access to Team and stuff like that. And it's funny, in preparing for this conversation and looking at Zoom, one of the articles that stood out was actually from The Verge, which is the fact that Microsoft has basically sent out an internal email saying that they actually see Zoom as an emerging threat, specifically because of Microsoft Teams and Skype. So you sort of hear Joe's story and wonder if underhandedly they're trying to figure out how to get some market share at a moment where Zoom CEO basically came out and offered Zoom free for K to 12 for free. So look, this is the new reality. There are many people, if you check this out, have privacy concerns about people all using Zoom. It is the top free app right now in the App Store, beating TikTok and anything else you can think of. We're going to see very soon if this is a real solution. And I think the real stress test, as you so intelligently put it, Bob, is going to be what the real feedback is from both teachers and students about how efficient this is. I don't know about you guys. I use Zoom all the time, and it's always one big hot mess where everyone's talking over everybody else. You got to mute everybody. Not everybody can see. It doesn't work. You're on, you're off. And I think those general frustrations that come with any sort of remote working is going to have an impact here. We are doing the best with what we have. Zoom is a great technology. Skype is as well. But no, I don't think it's going to replace anything close to sort of a business as usual or have it be any form of true transformation that you're going to see a shift away from the way we've traditionally learned work. We've had this technology. We've tried it like this.
So I'll agree with Mitch about 75%. I think you're right. I mean, I think for the most part, nothing replaces human interaction, and I don't think you can, and I think it's important to have it. But I think if you look at it and you just look at things logistically, any large corporation with mass real estate assets is going to have to look at things and think, hey, is it possible for me to have certain folks or a select percentage of my staff work from home 2 days a week, a day a week, whatever that period is, where I can now figure out how to rotate people's involvement so that 1 or 2 days a week they are available via Zoom or some other technology like it. And all of a sudden I can rethink about how I manage my space. And instead of having 2 office buildings, I could potentially manage 1, and so on and so forth. And I think to some degree that has to happen. I think this is forcing that thought process to happen. I think it would be negligent not to actually consider that as a value proposition for your overhead and the value of your company, especially if you're a public company, So I think on some level, it has to have some semblance of impact. I think that it doesn't replace, me going into the office 5 days a week, but maybe if I go into the office 4 days a week or 3.5, if I happen to live in the city, and somebody else can use that space that I typically use for that period of time, and we can begin to manage space in a different manner. I think that this does have a direct reflection on that, and I think if you're a company, it makes sense to consider that.
Yeah, I don't.
One second.
disagree.
Let's get Angela's opinion on this real quick. Angela?
Thank you. That's so kind. To start with, I feel that Paris is a bit lucky in the sense that people have had a huge head start in terms of working from home. The transport strikes gave even the most hierarchical companies months of practice. And France is considered the most formalized sort of working culture in all of Europe. Like people are really resistant to the idea of work from home. And that's part of why I think this will be a really strong work from home stress test, because in learning that, we actually, at our agency at Hurrah, we've always had a flex work from home policy, but we actually learned how effective some of those strategies were and how effective some of them were not, like what actually needed tightening. Also, while I fully agree that nothing replaces the human touch, I also feel companies often hide behind statements like that in order to enforce policies that don't tend to work for people. So to start with, it puts a huge emphasis on what we call presenteeism, which is just like people showing up, even if they don't necessarily have a purpose, even if commutes have become really difficult, etc. It puts a lot more emphasis on thinking somebody's working because you see them and not on the actual quality of their work. And the second thing, and this is something that we noticed when the transport strikes happened and people who typically did not work from home actually had to start working from home, a lot of them came back and said, I was a lot more efficient. It was a lot quieter. I was able to concentrate. Let's not forget that the vast majority of companies now, for many reasons, including cost, enforce open spaces on people, which are scientifically really awful to work in and really inefficient. Another thing that came up once we started seeing more people working from home was people talking about how they were less depressed and actually felt more creative, because once we realized what things did and did not work in the work from home strategy. So for example, we really made it important that even if you had a meeting, you had to show up. It was mandatory. Don't be late. Even if you're at home, you need to show up. That's a really big deal. People participated more often. They were more active. They were more interested in the discussion. We were a lot more interested in each other. Like seeing each other's home spaces is weirdly a good bonding experience. And ultimately, I think it teaches companies to trust the people that they're working with. A work from home strategy makes it really easy to find out who is useful and who is just a huge waste of time.
I feel like we're moving in a bit of a different direction, because I agree with everything that Angela's saying and Julian is saying, but I'm speaking about it specifically in relation to COVID-19. And that was my point, is that we've had this for decades. I mean, Joe Jaffe is here. He literally built the business almost 20 years ago in Second Life and had that as their office.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that stuff doesn't work. And I'm not saying anything you say isn't true. Of course it is. And I'm not saying I'm not more efficient. All true. But is COVID-19 and the forcing of this going to dynamically change things? I think we were on this progression. I think we were moving down this road. I think, Julian, it is very true that perhaps somebody might say, well, we can kill this office or have less people here, potentially. But ultimately, when I look at it in relation to COVID-19, I don't see much of a change.
Well, I think this will dramatically change norms, especially given that people are going to be doing this kind of work in this way for months. We're going to come out of this with very different expectations.
I think so, fundamentally.
And I'll tell you something. I was going to say that I agreed with 67% of what Julian said. and I calculated that, considering he agreed with 75% of what Mitch said, which meant, by the way, he disagreed with 25%. That means I agree with 50% of what you said, Mitch. My point
You're so good at math. So impressive.
No, trust me, I used a calculator. No, I think you guys actually presented both sides really, really well. I'll just add a third point, which is what is going to happen in the future. And this is just literally a third point in terms of like the behavior change. Angela, you're spot on with what you said, and is that when times get tough, and hopefully, please God, it will never ever, this really will be a once in a lifetime event, although we've been through many of those, like with 9/11. But even for things like extreme weather, companies will be able to just flip a switch and be able to almost, they'll at least have a process and a procedure for the entire workforce or for an entire department to be able to take it all remotely or virtually. And that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing, rather than, seeing how many people somehow brave 4 to 6 inches of snow to come into the city, to New York City. So I think at a very minimum, that will be a third element now that we have all we've tested it out for days, weeks, months, hopefully not longer than that, and it works. At a, people might have a choice, either or. But in cases where companies do need to move to this model B or this plan B, at least we know it works and we can improve on it.
Well, that conversation went all kinds of places that I loved. That was awesome. I think that this is definitely the way I feel about it is I think that it will fundamentally change the way that we think about work from home. I don't think that it will make it so that everybody goes and works from home and no one goes into an office anymore. I don't think anybody believes that's going to happen, but it makes it a viability that didn't exist before. And I love some of the conversation points. Angela, especially what you brought up about being able to determine who's really working and who's not, because it really does surface the reality of how valuable the employee is when you put them on their own and allow them by their own recognizance to do the work or not. So should be an interesting time, but we got to move on. In many ways, freelancers in our business are the best prepared for the work from home model. And yet with the wave of ad pullbacks by brands and inevitable layoffs by agencies, freelancers have immediately felt the pinch. Angela, you and I, we're both freelancers in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like we do a lot. You do a lot of journalistic endeavors. I'm involved with marketing, doing podcasts for people. What strategies should freelancers be adopting to address an unresponsive market at this particular time?
So I thought about this question two ways. And before I answer your question directly, I just wanted to say something because there are a lot of people who are quite new to working from home who just don't have any freelance strategies at all. And the biggest thing that I would say to them based on my observations of people who are just beginning their lockdown is it's going to be really important to impose boundaries in terms of time, because it becomes really, really easy, and you know this very well, it becomes really easy for your time, which kind of looks like free time because you're at home, to start looking like available real estate that can be filled with work at any point in time. And because you're not technically a freelancer, there are a lot of companies that will try to take advantage of this. So it's going to be up to a lot of people to sort of impose those boundaries, and also just create systems for yourself. Like even if it's starting with something small, like you don't work weekends and you get dressed in the morning, like just being able to impose a kind of ritual on yourself that separates personal from work life is psychologically really important. To get back to actual freelancers who've theoretically been doing this for a long time, I agree with you that I felt really well equipped personally for this situation. I was actually quite surprised by how many freelancers just can't be well equipped for really obvious reasons that I didn't think of, like wedding photographers, directors, people whose jobs actually involve going outside and actively networking in open spaces. They're feeling pretty, I can't say the word that I want to use, so I'll say forked. They're feeling pretty forked right now.
Just a good place.
Yeah, I love that show.
It's great.
Thank you for knowing it. I just like the idea of freelancers kind of acting as remote collectives, like in the same way people are throwing Skype parties and doing live karaoke right now. You could probably theoretically organize digital meetups with diverse profiles in small groups to give people an opportunity to cross-pollinate. Again, I don't know what to do about people like photographers, directors, etc. They're really like, the economy needs to come back, spending needs to come up. For everybody else, it's kind of like, also look at the areas that stand to gain. During the Depression, it said that the only industry that didn't lose any money was cinema, for what are hopefully obvious reasons. Esports and gaming are doing really well right now. OTTs are also going to make out like bandits. In France, paid cable networks are competing to demonstrate who's most generous with their content. They're all like trying to give free content away in the same way that Microsoft is trying to foist teams onto people. And also look at companies or organizations trying to help people out, because they're probably looking for visibility, and they're probably also looking for more hands. And I would also say use your existing skills to help put some kindness out into the world, because people are really anxious right now. They're getting really sort of apocalyptic. So at Muse, I actually started a creative questionnaire to give creatives all over the world something fun to do and read, while also sharing how they're coping with lockdown in different parts of the world. And I'm actually learning a lot from them, how they're thinking about life differently, but they're also sharing these really gorgeous snapshots of the world. So, for example, in France at 8 p.m. every night, people go to their windows and they just clap for the medical teams. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing to be able to share with other people. And Italians and Chinese people who filled out the questionnaire have also provided really unique perspectives on, the hardest hit places, like things they wish they knew earlier, things that they hope people take up. Like, so for example, in China, they're doing a lot of sort of like the sanitation methods that we've been asked to do when we go outside, but they add one more thing, like they're like, take your shoes off before you enter your home. Because yeah, we don't think about it. We are always tracking dust inside with our shoes. And the Chinese specifically also seem to be suggesting we should be preparing for a long haul. As a rule, I think that freelancing should teach you some discipline about saving. And while I've always adhered to that rule, to be honest, I really don't know how long my savings are going to last, or even how our understanding of money or our expectations will change as this evolves. I think that my best advice would be just the advice that I give myself. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen. I honestly feel like the world will change in ways we can't begin to predict. So find ways to structure time, manage your anxiety, be useful in small doses, cultivate new hobbies, read, be with your loved ones, and be with yourself. The new hobbies thing, I think, is really important. You have no idea what you're going to end up leaning on later, and we never have this kind of time. Notably, I'm really enjoying stories about people who are like dancing at home, doing karaoke, and like this just came out in France recently. People are having more accidents because they're just doing more do-it-yourself stuff at home. That means people are getting bored, and the boredom is working. We're getting weird, we're getting creative, and that's kind of like, where you start conceiving a different kind of reality.
So I think what's really interesting about this, from my perspective, is I'm very optimistic about the freelance space, and I guess I'll sound somewhat contrarian to myself when I talk about work from home. I think what's happening right now is really just a very sad sort of massive drop. It's very easy to look at budgets on a spreadsheet and go, look how much money we're paying for freelancers, cut that out, have the people who are working here do it so we don't have to fire them, potentially might be one of the scenarios that we're seeing. And I think the output of this, again, sadly, going back to the first conversation we had, is that I think the freelancer economy is going to be massive at the end of this, because we're going to have businesses looking at this and saying one of the best ways we can actually save money is to not have so many employees on, because we have services and options and things, we have benefits that we have to give them. And I also really think that we're going to see a lot of freelancers get very scrappy in terms of what the business model is. This moment in time is really, really scary. And I can hear it in your voice, and it's true and it's real. a lot of the challenges that I've seen with freelancers, and again, over the years running an agency, we dealt with thousands of freelancers, is they were really good at their work and not necessarily great at running the business of being a freelancer. And in this
Right.
day and age, at this moment, receivables is a huge thing. So you have dried up work, you're panicking, you're not feeding your machine, you're not good at the business or not great at it, not great at the receivables, and that's a real bad recipe for disaster. I also think that what we're going to see is a lot of freelancers actually return back into the workforce because of their sort of feeling of nakedness and understanding of, I was a couple projects away from personal bankruptcy, not that great. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities actually that are going to come out of this for the freelancer economy. And I think a lot of businesses are going to capitalize on it. But I also do think that a lot of freelancers who are right on the edge are going to go back into the workforce.
So I want to approach it a slightly different way as well, which is because I read the topic initially as, what are you doing right now? For example, if you're someone like Mitch or myself, and your public speaking and your number of keynotes has gone from hero to zero, what do you do during this time? How do you keep yourself sharp? How do you plan? How do you get revenue, like now and for the foreseeable future? And what do you do when all of this, and I've mentioned this several times on the panel tonight, when the dust settles and everybody comes out of hiding? And I have to say personally, my first few days, I was kind of stuck and not sure, and now I'm just trying to every day try and come up with another idea or innovate or do something. In some cases I've seen, I've really I've really kind of just given up on Facebook, but I've been very, very active on Facebook, using Facebook Live in particular. I've seen many people, Augie Ray, a good friend of the BeanCast, who's come back to Facebook during this time as well. But just putting that aside for a second, now is an opportunity for freelancers, for people to go deeper on their domain expertise, to read 3 or 4 books that they didn't have the time to do, to expand their body of work, to sharpen their performance skills, to enter a new genre. None of these things actually, even focus on things like new business or biz dev, because there isn't any business right now. But I think there really is a great opportunity now for people to say, keep yourself. This is the equivalent of your don't let your muscles atrophy. And I love everything that Angela said. I made a TikTok, and it's been a huge source of conflict in my home, because my kids, hate me, and they're completely embarrassed. Because I put it on Instagram. I invite you all to go and laugh at me on my Instagram. I didn't care. I just wanted to put myself out there. I wanted to show them that it's okay to put yourself out there. So I did almost injure myself as well. I almost smashed my head, trying to do some Europay German dance as well. But I think the balance of that stuff, right? Learning to cook, learning to do things, and these hobbies, which is things, we would never have got the chance to do these things before. That's the important thing, right, Angela? And it makes us more diverse, and it rounds us out, and makes us, less likely to be one track and so focused and intense on our day to day. But on the other hand, I encourage everyone listening that's fearful, that's scared right now, use this opportunity in this downtime to just become even more skilled and even better at what you do, because when the dust settles, you will be able to rise up again.
Well, I would add, one sort of thought to that, which is, in the speaking world, what I hear a lot is it's time to reinvent and create virtual seminars and online live streams and all this. And when I look at this as, again, someone who's been a business person for a very long time, I go, it's a very different business. When you cancel an event and you say to them, let's go virtual, that event planner passes it over to HR or whoever's handling online learning or extended learning. It's different departments. It's a different business model, essentially. And so when people talk about it like they're going to flick a switch and have have this new business model, I'm always like, yeah, I think it's going to take some time to actually understand what that business is and what the business model looks like, where the revenue is, how to be, unique within it and push it forward. But I think what both Angela and Joe said that, again, I really love is the fact that right now so many platforms are offering free courses. And if you have the ability to do it, one, just to take your mind off of it, forget productivity, where I was like, go, go, go. Maybe don't go. It's a very scary time, and I don't feel very productive or very happy or excited to learn things or produce things. And there's a lot of noise out there. So it's okay to also do nothing. It's okay to maybe take a course on something you've never thought you might take a course on and do that. But if you are feeling productive, I think the real opportunity is to expand your skill set. And again, you're home, we're stuck here, we're dealing with it. A couple minutes here, a couple minutes there of what Angela said, reading, taking some of these free online courses, stretching those muscles in different ways, not just stretching them to work them out, I think is a profoundly powerful thing. And I have young kids, and one of them, we were on a walk, said to me, maybe this is going to, she's actually saying how much she enjoys this. And I was surprised because she misses her friends, but I think she enjoys it because we're a family and we're really together a lot and we're in it together, and they probably feel that energy. And it really made me reflect that perhaps this is a reset for all of us. And as bad as it is financially, and as much as everyone is struggling, there's a tremendous opportunity here to reset, not just the economy, not just your job, but really how you see things or how you want things to be seen. And because all this stuff is free and accessible, and we have this technology, Zoom included, and Microsoft Teams included, I think the real waste of this moment would be to not leverage this to really try and expand your horizons, because whatever it is, it's giving us a massive break.
Yeah.
Well,
just to build on what you said about rest, there's an Instagram I follow called the Nap Ministry, which treats the idea of napping and sleeping as a revolutionary act. And there's a lot of data to back up that idea. There's a doctor that sent out a newsletter just about how we can protect ourselves during this time. And one of the things that he said that really marked me, that I think about literally every day, is that one of the things that we can start doing right now is to stop turning on our alarm clocks. We are literally the only animal that systematically interrupts a biological necessity for ourselves. So this is actually also a huge opportunity for repair.
What's it called again, Angela?
The Instagram?
Yeah.
It's called the Nap Ministry. You'd really like it.
Well, one company that took everybody's advice to re-envision themselves was Facebook. Facebook this week, in the middle of all this, has some news that has nothing to do with COVID-19 or coronavirus. They put out a new dashboard. Most of the users of Facebook on the desktop got to see it this past week. I'm sure that in the coming weeks, all of you will get to see it if you haven't seen it yet. Features dark mode, streamlined. It basically works like the app now. This is the first time that Facebook has updated their platform that I can remember, Julian, where everybody didn't get into an uproar. Maybe this was the perfect timing. They just had to wait for a global pandemic before they changed things.
Yeah, I think, the timing of who cares is fantastic. When nobody's really going to care and nobody's going to notice. It's really easy to do that, but to the degree, since I did read the article, to the degree that at least the platform functions a little bit kind of like the app does, I suppose if there's one bright side to this beyond who cares, because that was my initial thing, is who cares, is maybe people have a slightly better experience. It's supposed to load faster, et cetera, and this time right now where we're in somewhat relative isolation with only a minimal number of people around us at most and nobody around us at worst. An app which allows you to connect to people functioning in a more comprehensive manner is, I suppose, not the worst bit of news, but I still will tell you, who cares?
Everybody else agree?
I don't know. It showed up on mine, and I thought, I'm actually someone who really likes redesigns and this stuff. And I tried it for a bit and then said, let me try it again. And I reverted back to classic. I just think that when you do something like this, when you're Facebook size, regardless of timing, pandemics and things like that, I think they could have done it more staggered in stages and made it see more of a flow, almost the way corporations will update their logos and brand identity. I just felt it was a little bit too jarring, especially when you spend so much time on the platform. I think they're going to go back and do what I just said, which is sort of just roll out the stuff they really like slowly into the classic version.
I don't know. I really fell in love with it right off the bat. I thought it was great. It worked fantastic for me. Everything that I needed to do worked better. It was immediately accepted in my world, but I'm not sure where we're going.
This whole Facebook thing is an okay boomer moment if there ever was.
And with that,
my mom is on TikTok now.
we should take a moment just to kind of compliment Bob with that beautiful little one-liner, which is that it took a global pandemic for the entire Facebook community not to be up in arms about their latest redesign, because that really is the truth.
Yeah.
Well, with that, it's time for the fair, fail, foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with the man you just heard, Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at thehmsbeagle.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What do you want to promote?
Well, I'll tell you, while the actual HMS Beagle is docked at the shore for for the foreseeable future, during this time, I really have found myself surprisingly stimulated by doing new things and trying out new things. And one thing that I started doing was live streaming every day at 2 p.m. using, dare I say, Facebook Live and dare I say Zoom as well. And it's actually become, it's not business oriented, even though every day I say I'm going to talk about business and what companies should be doing. It's just become a personal opportunity to talk about what's on everybody's mind, and it's been amazing. So if you guys are interested in I can use this phrase, in joining the conversation, every Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can find the link off my Facebook page. And there is a Zoom link, and I typically post an agenda every morning on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and Facebook. And I would love, especially for this wonderful, wonderful community, to be part of that.
Sounds great. Sounds awesome. I've seen you doing it. So it's pretty awesome what you're doing. Next up, Mitch Joel. You can find him at 6pixels.com. That's where you can get his blog. You can find out about his books. You can listen to his podcast. There's so many things going on at 6 Pixels. So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote, Mitch?
Yeah, I think considering where the world's at, and to be honest, how bloody depressing I found this conversation a little bit. I would encourage people to look to some form of the arts, dive deep into a book. My favorite thing lately has been to just watch all these amazing artists do these live shows and concerts. Everybody from Chris Martin from Coldplay to the Indigo Girls to Mike Massey, who does amazing acoustic covers of 80s and 90s songs, to up here in Canada, legendary Kim Mitchell. I just saw one by Mike Peters at the Alarm the other night. Chick Corea. Just search them out on either Instagram or Facebook. It will really make you feel connected, both to yourself and to a community. And I find myself really holding back tears, even though the music's really positive, just seeing them in their domains, giving people music and hope and memories. And just so I would promote that. Just go do some of that.
That sounds like a good recommendation for everybody. I know I've been writing plays. I'm starting my third, and I've already did a playwriting contest where they wanted a 10-page play that used ingredients. It was a bake-off type situation. So yeah, there's a lot of things you could be doing that you didn't have time to do last week. Next up, Angela Natividad. I don't have a website for you. I'm not sure where to send people, but
no worries.
Obviously tell us what you want to promote.
Yeah. I would say check out the Work From Home Diaries on Muse by Clio. That's musebicl.io. Again, that's the questionnaire that I conducted of just tons of creatives all over the world, people doing all kinds of different stuff, how they're staying creative, what their lockdown has been like, how they're just sort of how they're staying inspired, how they're staying human. I learned a lot of really cool stuff. I think that you will too, so please take a look. And one last thing that I would say is Honestly, like the only real job any of us has right now is like making sure that we wash our hands and don't cough on anybody. And any way that you want to actually spend this time, don't feel bad about it because that's probably exactly what you need to be doing. You don't need to feel guilty about it on top. Literally, the only thing you have to do right now is wash your hands and don't cough on somebody.
That sounds like some great recommendations right there. Um, I think that's a good recommendation, even if there wasn't a global pandemic.
Yeah, please always do that, generally.
Yes, really. Last but not least, Julian Zilberbrand. You can find him at Viacom.com, where he does stuff with a thing called TV. So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to
Well,
promote?
normally in this section, I would talk about please watch TV because I like to eat and things of that nature. But I think, we've been giving a lot of our airways to kind of promote some of the stuff that Angela talked about in terms of washing your hands and social distancing and so on and so forth, which is my new favorite term, by the way. If you're doing one thing now, be cognizant that the things that we do today have real world impact on not only people you love, but other people that, you might know or people that somebody else loves. And, please practice the things that the experts are saying. Wash your hands, practice social distancing, do your best to kind of, be a good global citizen and, try to, do what you're doing today and stay as far away from people as you can while we're going through this. We can all get through this together if we all work together and have the same purpose, which is to get through this and get back to normal life. So I promote, let's get back to normal life.
Amen. Amen to that.
Amen.
As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. I am a freelancer, and you can even find out how to advertise on the program. That's another way you can support us, so definitely do that. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it is time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, there's a lot of people doing nice things for people out there. You mentioned the concerts. The concerts are nice. The sing-alongs are nice. People are trying to reach out and do nice things. The pro athletes have really shown the way on how to do things. I mean, some of the way that they've been responding in terms of trying to raise money for people in need right now, the way that some of them have taken from personal funds to pay the salaries of all the concession workers at the arenas that are now empty. The pro athletes have really shined in a way that is kind of surprising, Joe. I mean, it's just like, it's really surprising to me how well the pro athletes out there have been the beacon of what famous rich people should be doing in this time of need.
Yeah, and actually, if you take pro athletes and then you add to that list or that group celebrities, in particular actors and singers, and that is even before you obviously get to corporations and executives and board members. If every single, and certainly it's been incredible to see what these pro athletes are doing. I think, there's so many of them, right? JJ Watt and Steph Curry. It just goes on and on and on. And if everyone was to do that, we would be in an unbelievable position, not just in terms of the actual money invested and the good that it would be doing as a result, like food banks, but also just in terms of just aspirationally and inspirationally. And so we can only just hope, right? I mean, Mitch said I didn't find this discussion depressing at all. In fact, I found it very hopeful and uplifting, and this is a good way to end it, right? Which is looking, except for the fact that we're getting into fair and foul. But yeah, I mean, it's been amazing, and just these are a bunch of often we could say overpaid, indulged prima donnas, in professional sports, but they're not acting that way. And kudos to people like Zion and, these almost, these teenagers and 20 and 21-year-olds that are leading the way, showing the rest of the world what can be done if you actually, give back and act generously.
Well, when moving on to the fail, this is a well-intentioned effort. I can't really fault it. What Gal Gadot, get it right yet? Gal Gadot
Gadot.
did.
Gal Gadot.
Gadot, I
Yeah,
think.
Gadot. Yeah.
Is
Gotta
that
say
how
it with
she
an
pronounces
accent.
it? I think.
Gadol? Gadol is big.
Well, either way, she sparked kind of a social media backlash after she and a whole bunch of her celebrity friends went and posted a video showing them all singing Imagine for the masses out here suffering under the coronavirus specter, I should say. So it was well intentioned, but the backlash came that why are you just singing a song and you're not even singing it well for us to feel better about stuff when it's like not helping us at all? Why don't you dip into your bank account? Why don't you start a charity? Why don't you do something that can help people other than singing to them?
Well, look, I think the mistake may be that to sort of make those assumptions that they're not already doing that.
Right,
And
it
I
is.
think that's.
But it
part
was
of the
obviously a
stress that
PR.
I have.
It's not fair, but it's definitely it's definitely a PR not disaster, but it's a PR trouble for them having done something like this and being caught in the social media backlash. Like most social media backlashes, it's not going to last.
I just thought it wasn't good.
It
That's the hard thing when you look at the level of celebrity and that type of song. You just sort of like, it's almost like when you've got a great strategy and you see the final ad and you're like, what happened? And it all fell down in casting and lighting and tone and energy. And it's an unbelievable thing. When you watch this video, the only thing you think to yourself is, how is this not working? It's frustrating.
It was awful.
It's because it was organized on Zoom. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
They should have used Microsoft Teams.
It was bad, but if that's what you're going to get mad about right now, you really need to check yourself.
Well, the foul of the week I'm going to give to the social media platform TikTok. In a report from The Intercept, TikTok was shown to be systematically depressing the visibility of the ugly and the poor, their words, while promoting videos from the beautiful, rich, and famous. Obviously, this does not surprise anybody, Angela, that they were doing this, because you always kind of knew in the back of your head that that's what they were doing. But I mean, all the platforms are doing this. They've got to be. But to be so blunt about it in the leaked memos was pretty discouraging, I guess, or pretty horrifying to read.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to this. I mean, if you're going to operate on a system that's kind of like you're the thing that's being sold, you already by default know that they have a manipulative algorithm. They're going to make subjective, not necessarily nice decisions about what gets pushed to the top. I don't really know what you expect.
I just sort of looked at the news and thought, oh, social media platforms only encouraging the rich, good looking, and famous. Is there a story here? Is there a story here, really? I mean, how come they just didn't give them all blue check marks was my question.
Yeah, this reminds me of when the news article about when Gen Z found out that TikTok was keeping their data, like nothing was actually ever disappearing. And it was just kind of like, welcome.
Welcome to the world. Welcome to how data works.
I find it interesting that anybody is surprised that a company that is run out of Beijing, influenced by the communist government, is doing things that are not in the ideal scenario democratic.
You don't need a communist government to take everybody's data and keep it. You know that. Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hopefully, and hope to see you then.
That was a bit apocalyptic there.
I know. What was that? hope
Scary,
that he
The
had?
government might shut him down. He doesn't know.
I know.
It's like you know what I mean. It's like if it's you know what I mean. I don't know, man. Just like okay, it's like you know what I mean. Like it's like totally like that. It's like I don't know. Like if it's you know, it's like you know what I mean. Yeah, it's just like kind of. It just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.